This presentation contains information that will aid the company's decision-making process regarding doing business in India. This presentation provides information and data about the following areas as they relate to India: the Hofstede Cultural Dimensions Analysis Tool, the Communication and Scheduling Culture, common negotiation techniques, current government and political considerations, the Economic Freedom Index, the regulatory environment for business in the country, World Trade Organization membership and most favored nation status, foreign direct investment considerations, GDP and financial health analysis, and currency and exchange rate values. It concludes with a summary of 3 products that could potentially be marketed in India. The Hofstede Cultural Dimensions Analysis Tool compares 6 cultural dimensions on a scale of 1 to 100 to evaluate how different cultural values affect the workplace. The Power Distance Index measures how well the less powerful members of an organization expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. The Individualism Scale demonstrates the degree of the people's interdependence with each other and whether they think more in terms of I or we. Masculinity refers to whether the people are more motivated by achievement and success or by quality of life. Uncertainty avoidance measures the extent to which members of the culture feel threatened by the unknown. The long-term orientation dimension reflects the attitude the people take toward holding on to past traditions or adapting to societal change. Finally, indulgence describes the extent to which people try to control their impulses and desires. The main differences between India and the United States on the Hofstede analysis are power distance, individualism, and indulgence. India scores high on power distance, meaning employees will depend on a supervisor to provide direction and that managers can count on obedience and loyalty of their team members. India has an intermediate score of 48 in individualism, which means they will be motivated by the opinion of their peer group and will typically work toward the greater good. And finally, India scores very low, 26, in indulgence, which means employees will not put much emphasis on leisure time and will demonstrate restraint in pursuing their own desires. This combination of societal traits will generally mean that Indians will be good, hardworking employees if the company chooses to do business within the country. It is important to understand the cultural norms and communication styles, especially if they differ between India and the United States. Implicit communication is commonly used in India, meaning they depend on facial expressions, physical reactions, or body language rather than direct explicit language. They also prefer indirect negative feedback and are very non-confrontational culture, ranking as one of the least confrontational cultures in the world. This means feedback and disagreements should be handled privately and respectfully. Finally, India has a very flexible scheduling culture, meaning that changes to plans and project timelines should be expected when doing business there. The most important thing you can do when doing business in India is build a meaningful relationship with your potential business partners. This will help to gain the trust of those you are doing business with, which is vitally important, and will help your potential partner know that you are serious about this business and are sticking around. But make sure that you watch for the deceptive negotiation techniques used in business negotiations in India, which could include things like lying, guilt tripping, or grimacing. These are considered normal negotiation methods and should not be taken personally. Just make sure the terms of the contract are clear and that any agreements are written down. India has based their government around the United Kingdom model, being a federal democratic republic with a parliamentary system. Parliament is the supreme legislative body in India and even has power to exercise control over the executive branch of the president. Their president Ram Nath Kovind and their prime minister Narendra Modi have great influence over India and over the international business side of the country. The government is currently extremely welcoming to international business. Prime Minister Modi has been a big part in helping India become a bigger economy and is still striving for more economic power. However, it should be noticed that elections may change the business environment in India. India scored a 67.23 out of 100 on the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business scale. While it's fairly easy to start a business, there are some concerns that should be addressed. The tax systems are extremely complex, but this concern can be addressed by hiring a good team of accountants. The major concern is that India ranks 164th out of 190 on the contract enforcement scale. Contract disputes take a very long time to settle and are very expensive, However, there are signs that India's current government is taking steps to improve in this area. The Economic Freedom Index ranks the economic freedom of 186 countries comparatively. India has an overall score of 55.2 on the Economic Freedom Index, ranking them 129th freest country. When compared to the United States score of 76.8 and the world average of 61.1, India has less freedom than average. The Economic Freedom Index score gives insight into risk when conducting business in India. However, while some risk does exist due to the subpar score, the Prime Minister has been taking measures to improve the economic environment. India continues to be the fastest growing economy, leading to the conclusion that the Economic Freedom Index score is high enough to successfully conduct business. India's business environment is very friendly toward foreign investment. They have most favored nation status in the World Trade Organization, which means their tariff rates are standardized and easy to research. They have trade agreements in place that favor imports from the countries in their region, and their tariffs are generally low on manufacturing equipment and supplies. They provide several tax incentives for foreign investment and have set up special economic zones designated specifically for business and industry. The fastest method to achieve foreign investment in India is through merger and acquisition of existing entities, but new businesses can also be established. The purchasing power parity per capita of gross domestic product is considered in the low income range by the World Bank. This would normally concern us because of potential lower performance compared to establishing manufacturing in a country with better income performance. However, because of India's high population and fairly consistent GDP growth, it is expected that India will continue on the path of growth. This fact is further backed up by India's inflation rate of 2.58% for the first part of this year, which puts it in an ideal range for growth. We see that India's benchmark interest rate has been dropped to 6% by the Reserve Bank of India. With these indicators, the GDP is projected to continue around a 7.4% range for the remainder of this year, giving good economic conditions for continued growth. As seen in the chart, the value of the rupee against the US dollar has varied over the last 5 years, but has generally trended downward. This poor exchange rate has been largely because of high oil consumption and increasing government deficits. Because of these potential issues with exchange rates, it is suggested that measures be taken to minimize the exchange risk, including future currency contracts and hedging through loans at local banks, depending on the interest rates at the time. Because of the vital importance of the agricultural system in India and a large portion of the population that derives incomes from this industry, urea and fertilizer production is one of our target industries. There are currently 31 plants manufacturing 80% of the urea consumed in India. These manufacturers are heavily subsidized by the government. Despite this production, there are still shortages that leave farmers with only black market sources for the product, often paying twice the subsidized rate. With 20% of the product imported, India is looking for further investments into urea production. Market demand is expected to increase by 11% annually, causing further shortages that will affect the farmers. Because of the method used to calculate the subsidy, there is waste and corruption, and little is done to improve the efficiency or effectiveness of urea manufacturing plants. There are a few scalable technologies that have been developed, are better for the environment, and are currently being tested in the United States. These new methods do not require nearly as much energy, infrastructure, or fossil fuels. Redirection of the government subsidies to the farmers in India would allow an innovative company to gain a significant temporary competitive advantage in the urea fertilizer industry. Adding to it a cleaner and more environmentally friendly product would allow this innovative company to help the local farmers improve their soil conditions with healthier and well-balanced fertilizers. India was the 12th largest exporter of leather shoes in 2017, exporting $1.4 billion, which was 2.7% of the world total of leather shoe exports. Total leather good exports from India were over $3 billion from April to October 2018. However, because the cow is a sacred religious symbol for many people in India, government leaders began cracking down on illegal slaughterhouses and have also banned the trading of cattle for slaughter. Many Indian leather businesses can no longer source hides for their leather products, forcing them to close their doors. Importing cowhide to serve the leather industry would provide a resource to an underserved market and allow local citizens to keep their livelihood. In order to avoid a higher goods and services tax, the leather should be raw or tanned but cannot be a finished product. Importing cowhides would provide India's leather industry with a consistent supply of quality leather from the United States, allowing leather merchants to stay in business. Another product that could be successful in India is a solar power bank for charging cell phones. India has the fastest growing market for mobile phones. There are more cell phones in India than there are toilets. While a majority of the population has cell phones, many residents of rural towns don't have access to chargers. It is forecasted that the mobile charger industry will grow $6.9 billion in the next 5 years, with a large portion of this growth in India. Most competitors are located overseas and pay a tariff costing about 30% of the value of the product. The high taxes are crushing profit margins for the main competitors. By creating a business in India, profit margins would be higher, allowing for lower prices, therefore enabling low-income households access to a cell phone charger. Currently, solar energy is being implemented by the government into some villages. While changes are being made to make electricity more accessible, a large portion of cell phone users still must travel to charge their phones. The solar power bank would be a good solution for the average resident of these villages. This concludes our presentation. We look forward to receiving your product decision.